Hello, everybody. Welcome to Automation Hour. Thanks for joining us. If you're joining us for the first time, all lines are muted. Please post your questions to the Trailblazer community, Salesforce Automation Hour. Sometime after the session, we will post a link to the recording as well as the deck out on our Trailblazer community, Salesforce Automation Hour, on our website, automationhour.com. We'll post out to LinkedIn and we'll tweet it out as well. So if you haven't signed up for our sessions that we have through mid-June, definitely I recommend signing up. Even if you can't join us, you'll get the link to it afterwards. I do want to make a speaker change notification for our May 14th session that we now have a new speaker. Jessie was not able to, due to workload, is not able to present, but we hope to get her back sometime in the future. So I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Concrete.io. Without them, we cannot bring this free webinar series, and we've been able to do this for several years now. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And here are your co-hosts. We haven't seen you all in a while, David, Rakesh, and myself. Hopefully when people are vaccinated, we'll be able to see each other again in real life. And I'm very excited to have this dynamic duel on today. Nana and Marshall, I've seen them present, I think, at Dreamforce or some of the other events. So I'm really excited to have them on our stage today to share all the goodness of flow. So with that, let me hand over control to Marshall and they can introduce themselves.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Jen, Rakesh, and David. Really appreciate you having us on. I am Nana Gregg, and I've been on Automation Hour. I think this will be my third time. So I'm like an old veteran, and always have fun spending time talking about how to do things with the declarative tools and really fun things. This is our Fun Friday, right? So I'm a solution architect with VFP Consulting. A member of the Salesforce MVP Hall of Fame. You see my blog there and my Twitter handle and my LinkedIn, and I'm pretty active socially and have been around the Salesforce space for 14 years now, so been around for a while. And the reason Marshall and I are considered a dynamic duo is I actually used to work for Marshall over at JLL. He was my boss and mentor, and so we've presented together just a ton. And some of these solutions that we'll talk about, and the one that we're going to show you is one that we developed when we worked together.
Yes, and things have been crumbling since Nana left. I'm trying to keep it going, but without Nana there, it's been a challenge. So thank you for attending today. This is my first Automation Hour, so I'm really excited to be invited to participate. I am the Salesforce Financial Force Platform Manager for JLL Technologies. We are the technical division of JLL that do all the cool stuff with real estate technology. I have also presented at Dreamforce and at Financial Force Summit and other groups. There's my Twitter handle, although there's not much activity there, and I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out and do so. So I'm going to set things up for us today. We're going to talk about sharing. So we're going to go through a record sharing use case specifically that we implemented in our org. We're going to talk about what the challenge was and how we solved it. We're going to review the personas that are going to be involved in our demonstration, and then we'll do a live demonstration. We'll click through each element of the flow and talk about how we built it and why. And then we will do a couple of live record creations so we can see the actual results of the flow. We'll review some of the challenges and considerations of developing flows that involve sharing. And then we thought we would have some time at the end where we could show you some other flows that we've built to help ourselves as admins. You know, Flow is an amazing tool to help optimize your user experience and streamline things for your customers, but there are also lots of ways you can use Flow to make your life easier as an admin. I like to tell people that I'm fairly lazy, and if I can find a way to do it with a more easy approach, that's what I'm going to do rather than doing something manually that takes a long time. And we'll take questions and answers either throughout or at the end as well. And Jen mentioned how to post into the community to get your questions out there. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nana to set up our story today.
All right, sharing is caring. As most of you probably know, objects in Salesforce can be public or they can be private. And I'm going to set up our use case here, and we'll talk about what the need was, what the request was, and then we'll talk about kind of how we solutioned that. So in our org, we have support desk, and when individuals submit tickets into the support desk, a support desk representative works that ticket, closes the case, and a survey from an external survey tool gets sent to the contact who submitted that ticket into the system. And so our contact fills out the survey in that external survey tool. And that survey result, when they fill out that survey result comes back into the system via an integration, and a record, a private survey record, gets stored on a custom object that we created. And so it's a private custom object, it's called private surveys, and that record gets stored. It's owned by an integration user. And when it comes in, it's linked to the case, and it's linked to the account that that case was submitted upon. Okay, so the request from the business was that they didn't want the case owner to see the results that came in. They wanted to kind of handle that on a case-by-case basis. And so they wanted this particular record to be private, but they wanted the manager of the case owner to be able to see the survey results. So the manager could see them, act upon them, kind of give guidance to that case owner if they need to. And they also wanted the account owner. So the case is submitted on a specific account. They wanted the account owner to be able to see that survey result. But otherwise, they wanted it to be private. And if you all know sharing rules in Salesforce, with the standard out-of-the-box sharing rules, we can share with groups of people based on attributes on the record, but we can't always, we can't reach through and share based on, you know, a record that's related to this record, right? We can only do that with Apex sharing or now within Flow. So again, the problem is the survey results should be shared with the manager of the case owner and with the account owner, but we don't want the case owner being able to see it. And we want to do that programmatically. We don't want to write code for it. We want to do that declaratively in the system. Marshall, you want to go take a look? So our solution is within Flow, what we're going to do is when a new survey record gets inserted into the system, into the database via that integration user, and that record gets saved, we want to have a flow that goes and looks to find out who the owner of the case is, goes to look and find the manager of that case owner, and stores that information. And then we need to look at the account owner, store the information for the account owner, and then we need to create sharing records on that private survey record to share that private survey record with the case owner's manager and the account owner. So there's your setup, and Marshall's going to take us through what it looks like in the system.
Okay, thanks, Nana. So first of all, these are our players today, our personas. I will be the case owner, and my manager is David Bowie. So he will be viewing the results of the surveys on my cases. We also have two accounts, Purple Rain, which will be owned by Prince, and Stardust Hotel, which will be owned by David Bowie, who is also my manager. So we're gonna have a couple of different scenarios here. And so with that, I'm going to flip over and we're gonna actually take a look at this flow. So we'll go here to our flow builder, and I'll point out a couple of things. First of all, we're gonna notice that this is a record triggered flow. This is a fairly new option inside of Flow. It used to be, as many of you may know, that you had to trigger all of your flows with Process Builder. And so now we have these really nice record triggered flows, which I love. It's one of my favorite newer features inside of Flow. So we'll take a look at this. It's triggered when a record is created because we only need to do it upon the initial creation. Nothing's going to change after the survey record is created. And then we're going to run this flow after the record is saved. So these will be the conditions that'll fire. And then we need to tell the system which object. As Nana mentioned, our object is called private survey. And we don't have any conditions because it's going to fire every time a new survey record is created. So that part's pretty straightforward. Upon insert, or after insert, I should say, we'll fire this flow. So before I go into the steps of the flow, I want to talk a little bit about how you access sharing information on an object. And I'm going to do that by creating a variable just to show you how it works. So many of you may be flow experts and have been doing flows for years. For some of you, flows may be fairly new. So I'm going to explain some things to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm going to create a variable that's based on an object, which is, again, a really cool feature of flow. So I'm just going to, for the purposes of this demo, call this demo. And the data type for my variable is going to be record. So I'm going to use this variable to hold information about a record. And when you do that, the system says, okay, cool, what object will be stored in this variable? So when I go in here, I'm going to type in private survey, which is the name of our object, and you'll notice I have this option right below here called share private survey. So this is where the sharing takes place. This is where the sharing information is stored, and the way that you can manipulate sharing is by inserting and updating data in this share object. So it functions like another object or a table in the system. It just holds sharing information specific to our private survey object. So now that being said, if I look at another object, we have another object called public survey. You'll notice public survey doesn't have that share option below it. Public survey is public, as you might have guessed. And so if something is public, if the object is public, there is no sharing to be manipulated. So you won't even have that option available to you. So if you start to work with sharing in your org and you find an object that doesn't have a share option, well, then it's not private, it's public.
Or there are some cases where there are some Salesforce standard objects that don't have sharing as options, things like price books. So you can go to Trailblazer Help and look up sharing considerations, and it'll give you kind of all of those ins and outs about what can be shared and what can't.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so this explains how you can start to get access to sharing information. So let's look at how we do it in this flow. The first thing we have is an assignment. And so an assignment is where we're going to take information from various places and we're going to hold them in a variable. And if I edit this, you'll see that we have a variable called sharing record. So this is that record variable that's referencing the private survey. And here are the fields we're going to populate. In the sharing record, so in that sharing object, there is a parent ID field, and that is the ID of the record that you're sharing. So in our case, because this is a triggered flow, we have this object called a record, which is the record that triggered this flow. So every time a survey triggers the flow, that survey is held in this $record variable. And so I can reference all the fields in that object. And so I'm going to grab the record ID of the survey that just got created. And just let me show you how that works in case you haven't done this before. So I'm going to remove this. And you'll click in here and you'll have all your various resources. And then down here towards the bottom, you will have record. Why am I not? There it is. Sorry, I just can't see. And then when you go into record, these are all of the fields on that object. So you can see, as Nana mentioned, we have an account, we have a case, we have your usual created by, modified by, etc. And you'll notice here you can actually reach through to the other objects, which we'll be doing here in just a second. But for now, I just want to grab the ID of this record. So this is what I want to share. This is the parent ID. Next, who do I want to share with? So that sharing object has a field called user group ID. So you can share with a user, or, which is kind of cool, you can share with a group. I haven't personally done group sharing. I haven't had a need for it, but you can manipulate group sharing through the same flow capabilities. And so in this case, we're sharing with the manager of the case owner. So we're sharing with my manager, David Bowie. So again, we're looking at the record and we're referencing the case on that record, and we're referencing the user, the owner, which is me, and then we're referencing my manager. So it's really nice. This is not brand new in Flow, but this didn't used to be the case in Flow that you could reach through objects to related information. So now in one step, we can go from record to case to owner to the manager of the owner. So now we have David Bowie's ID, and we're going to put that into this user group ID field. And then last, we have custom object access. So you have two options here. You have read only or you have read write. There's actually a third called owner, but you can't use that one. That's one that Salesforce reserves. So you can give them read only access or read write access to the object through this sharing rule. Okay, so this is our first share. We're getting the share for the manager. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add that to a collection variable. So instead of going out and immediately creating that share, we're going to gather together all of the sharing activity and we're going to create them at once at the end of the process, which is good flow practice so that you minimize the load on the system. We just do it all at once at the end. So we have that sharing record that we just populated with those 3 fields, and we're going to add it to this thing called a sharing collection that we'll eventually use. And Nana has a really nice metaphor for this. You want to explain your metaphor for sharing, for records and
For,
objects and collections?
Yes, absolutely. So I always like to break things down into easy to understand, not necessarily Salesforce language. And our first assignment where we took our fields, right, that we wanted to collect, we need the case ID, or we need the survey ID, we need the person's owner manager ID, and we need that read value, right? We're going to take those, and when we do this first assignment where we're populating this record object variable, it's kind of like taking a Post-it note, and I'm writing the stuff I need on a Post-it note. Okay, so I've got this survey, and it's this is the case owner's manager, it's David Bowie, and he needs to have read access, and I've written that on a Post-it note, and that's what this record variable is. It's the Post-it note where I wrote the information on it. Okay, so the next one, we're going to take that Post-it note that we just wrote and we're going to put it in a bucket, right? That's our collection variable. So we're writing on a Post-it note, we're putting it in a bucket to hold it for later, right? And then when we get through our next steps, we're probably going to write another Post-it note because we need the account owner, put it in the bucket again. And then at the end, we're going to take everything in the bucket and we're going to throw it over the fence and we're going to create those records. Okay, so I always kind of like to use that analogy. We're writing some Post-it notes, we're gathering them together, and at the end, we're going to create something from all those Post-its.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so as Nana said, we need to next get our account owner, but there's a little bit of a wrinkle here. You can't share with the same person twice. If you do, you will get that dreaded email that there's a flow error and you got to go look through all the flow history and figure out what went wrong. So what you have to do in this situation, and you may have to do this in all of your situations, depending on how you're sharing, is you may have to have a decision to look and see if you're already sharing with that person. So in this case, we want to make sure that the owner of the account is not the same person who is the manager of the user, because if so, we would try to share with them twice and get an error. So we've inserted a decision. And that decision looks to see if the account owner is the same as the manager. So this is the record, the survey record, and it looks at the account of the record and it looks at the owner. And it says, is that the same as the owner of the case and that person's manager? If they are the same, then we have this outcome called yes, account owner is manager. Otherwise, we have the default outcome, which is no, account owner is not manager. And so now we can take action. We can have the decision with these 2 branches. If the owner of the account is also the manager of the person, then we don't need to share again. We've already handled that in our first scenario. So basically this branch just does nothing. But if they're different, then we do need to create a second sharing rule. And so we do the exact same thing here. I'm just going to show it briefly, but same thing. We're going to grab the record ID of the survey. We're going to grab this time the owner of the account. And again, we're reaching through the survey to the account to the owner. And then we're going to give them read access. That's our Post-it note. We're going to take that Post-it note and add it to our collection. So as Nana said, we're going to chuck it in a bucket. And now we've got 2 records in that bucket that we're ready to create. And what's really nice is then you can just do a create element and say, hey, I want you to create everything in my sharing collection bucket, my record variable collection. And it will create those 2 shares or 1 share, depending on which branch of the decision we went down, and then we'll be done. So it's not a super complex flow, but there are some things you need to consider about how you access and share that information. But now we'll actually go and we'll show this functioning live in our system. So I'm going to flip over here to back to the user interface, and we see our 2 accounts.
Yep. And Marshall, why don't you go to the Purple Rain account, because I think a survey came in on the Purple Rain account before we set up this sharing. So let's take a look at that. And why don't we see what the sharing looks like on this record?
Okay, so in order to view sharing, I'm going to have to switch over to Classic.
No. Yeah, actually, you're not, Marshall. So
What?
prior to Spring 21, you could only view sharing in Classic, but with the Spring 21 upgrade, you can now add the sharing button to your record in Lightning on most records. There's a few caveats, and you can look at the release notes for that. But looky there, we've got our sharing right here in Lightning, so we can take a look at it.
You're blowing my mind.
I know, crazy, right?
So here we can see the share information. You can see that it's shared with one group of users. And if we click edit, we can actually see it's shared with Nana because she is our integration user in today's demo. And then of course I'm an admin, so I can see it, but normally I wouldn't be able to see this because the only person that can see it is Nana or other admins. Okay, are we ready to do this?
I think so. There's a couple other cases there on Purple Rain. If we take a look, I think one of them just closed and it looks like the survey has just come in. Why don't you take a look and see if it's there now? Oh, there we go. Why don't we look and see? So if we remember, the Purple Rain account is owned by Prince, of course. The case was closed by Marshall, and Marshall's boss is David Bowie.
Perfect. So we should have two sharing activities here. And you'll see it says share with 3 groups of users. If we click on edit, it's shared with David Bowie, read only, Prince, read only, and then Nana as the integration user and the owner. So that worked. It's always nice when demos work.
It is, isn't it? All right, why don't we check out the Stardust account. So a reminder here on the Stardust account is owned by David Bowie, who is also Marshall's manager. And let's take a look at the case. The case here, oh, it was closed by Marshall. Looks like that survey is coming in. Now, again, this is that situation where we don't need to share with David Bowie twice because he owns the account and the case. So let's take a look.
And there we go.
All right, we've got him shared here.
Yep, shared with David Bowie once and nobody else can see it.
Now, what would have happened, Marshall, if we hadn't handled for that in the flow?
We would have gotten an email from Salesforce with a flow error, which I hate getting those, but it would have told us, I don't remember the exact language, I probably should have looked that up, but something about, you can't share with somebody who is already accessing the object.
Yeah, and now the good thing here is because we created this flow as an after save flow, what that enables is because this record is coming in from an integration, it's going to get saved into the database first, and then we're going to do the sharing. So if for some reason it hits an error as it's doing the sharing, the record itself is already saved in the database, right? And it would have just been shared with me because I'm the integration owner, and it would have failed at sharing it with other people, but the record would still be there for us to go fix, right? If we had actually done this flow as a before save flow, it would have actually prevented that record from being saved into the database. So you got to think about your order of operations here. We don't want to prevent the records from coming in and being saved because then that record just never gets in the system, right? And we've got to go find it in our external survey tool and we've got to resend it. We want to make sure it comes in and then we'll go through and we'll do those shares so that we can avoid the potential of not having those records saved into the database.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So let's take a look now at some of the warnings and considerations that we mentioned. So we've talked about this one previously. If you don't see the sharing option, then either it's not private or it's not shareable. So you want to make sure you're looking for that share object. There is a field that we didn't show you today called row cause, and we didn't because we normally don't use it because many of these values in the pick list are used by Salesforce and they won't let you use them. So if you pick a random row cause, Salesforce may give you an error and say you can't use that one. So we typically leave it blank, and then I think it defaults to manual sharing.
Yeah, and you'll notice that's also one thing that doesn't show up in Lightning. You don't see that row cause in the Lightning sharing screen. You do actually see that row cause when you look at the sharing in Classic. So that's kind of another difference between looking at it in Classic and Lightning.
As we've mentioned, you can't share with the same user twice, so there are various ways to handle that depending on how you're sharing. We have another use case where we may need to add somebody to something that's already been shared previously. And in that case, we actually go and we get all of the current people that are in the sharing, and then we have what we call a dedupe loop. We loop through all those people to see if the new person we're adding is already there or not. And if they're not in the sharing list, then we add them to a collection and they get created. But if they are in the sharing list, we just skip them and we don't add them. So different ways to handle that depending on if you're sharing one time or if you're sharing over and over as things change inside of your system. Something interesting, when you change the record owner, the existing sharing information is lost. So that's another scenario you may need to handle for. If you want that sharing to stay in place when somebody changes the owner, you may need a flow that gets that sharing information and keeps it so that then you can reapply it when the owner changes. Also, you can only share with active users. So we have a case where we share with people on an account team. And if somehow an inactive person has been left on the account team, we'll get an error when we try to share with them. So you want to keep your data clean by removing people that are inactive, but also you can handle that in your flow. You can say, look to see if this person is active, and if they are, add them to your sharing collection, otherwise skip them. So there are various ways to handle that scenario. Okay, so that's our sharing use case. We did want to go over some other ideas about flow. So we're going to jump into some of these. We're not going to do as thorough of a demo and a walkthrough as we did just now, but as I mentioned, Nana and I have over the years tried to think of ways to make our lives easier by using flows. Things that are routine and manual for us, are there ways that we can speed those up and just make our lives easier and make us more efficient? So these are some of the ones that we've come up with. We thought we'd walk through a few of them. We won't have time to walk through all of them. So I'm going to start off and I'm going to talk about products and price books. So if you use products and price books, and if you're multi-currency, you know that you have to add new products to your price books in all of the currencies that you want to use. You also have to add it to the standard price book first, and then you add it to whatever specific price books you use. So, if somebody wants to add a brand new product, it's kind of tedious to either do it manually, and if somebody wants to add a bunch of products, it's really tedious to have to build these spreadsheets and do data loads to try to get all that data uploaded. I used to do it through data loads, and I would inevitably make a mistake or forget something and have to do it multiple times. So we decided to write a flow to handle that. So I'm going to just show you just the screens and how it works really quickly. We have a flow screen that we've just put on the home page for our admin app, and I fill in the details of the product. We have some custom fields that we track on products, so I put in all of that information and I hit next, and then I'm done. And what the flow will do is go out and it will find all of the currencies. I think I have that flow open. I do. So here's my flow screen. It will go and look for all the currencies I have in the system. It will create the product for me first, and then it will loop through all the currencies, and it will add it to the standard price book, and it will add it to the JLL, what we call the JLL price book. We just have one price book for our opportunities. So it'll loop through and do all of that work, and then at the very end, it does a create and creates all of that information for me, so that I don't have to do all of that work manually through a data load. And then a different scenario, it's the same problem, is when you add a new currency, you now have to add all of your products to your price books in that new currency. And we have several hundred products. And so again, it's just a real hassle to do exports and manipulate data and do data loads. So we have the world's simplest flow. It's just a list of the currencies in our system. And so if I add a new currency, I go do that first through the normal process. And then I come here and I pick my currency and I hit next, and that's it. And all it does is it looks for all the active products, and then it creates each of those active products in the standard price book in the new currency, and then in our JLL price book in the new currency. So these two flows have saved me hours and hours and hours of time as our company is changing and growing and adding products and adding currencies. It's been a huge benefit for us. Okay, Nana, I think you're going to talk to us a little bit about our user onboarding process.
Yeah, so as Marshall mentioned, you know, we love to write flows, and we also love to practice writing flows. And so we do that. We practice a lot of times by creating flows for ourselves to make our lives easier. And our user onboarding, when I was at JLL, was pretty complicated because our system, we have kind of a complex system with additional applications. It's Sales Cloud and Service Cloud and additional applications like Financial Force PSA. We can't just create a user in the system with a profile and they're on their way. We have to, there's various groups that they have to be added to, various permission sets. There's information we have to gather from the hiring manager, where we have to gather things like their utilization targets from a resourcing perspective, because the Financial Force PSA is professional services automation, and so we're managing our resourcing. And so what we do is we actually created this custom object called employees. And when somebody says, I've got a new hire, we kind of set up this new employee request form and we send it to the manager. And you can see the manager has this flow here where they can come in and they fill out the information about their new hire. And they walk through and they give us the information that they need, what their utilization target is, when their start date is, some various information that's important for the setup. And then the next step is we give them a little description of sort of the various personas and roles that we have in the system. And we have them fill out, you know, the type of user this needs to be. And when they hit next, it actually sends a notification to our admin team. And our admin team then can take a look at this information and fill out any additional fields that they need to fill out. And then you can see over on the right-hand side, we've got a flow for our admin team, where based on the information that was provided from the user manager, it's suggesting the profile that we give to this particular user. And our admin team actually runs this create user flow that creates the user. It assigns the permission sets for the user. It gives them the public groups that they need to be given access to. And then it actually goes another step and it creates that contact or resource record that we need from a Financial Force PSA perspective. And it actually goes further and does some things like giving them assignments to log time. So it's pretty complex, but it saves so many steps when we're setting up new users. It also enables us to do some things like tying these records together. So we've got our employee record, we've got a user record, we've got a contact/resource record. And so we tie all of those records together at the end so that we can then keep them up to date as things change in the system. And it's really done a great job of helping us not only be able to onboard people really, really quickly, but make sure that we're gathering the right information and we're setting people up the same way every single time, even as complex as it is.
Yep, and you can see here, I just brought up the flow setup. You can see it's actually several flows depending on the type of user, and then also we break it up and we have some subflows. But I was going to show this one just because it's kind of cool looking when you look at it at a high level. It's what Nana described about applying all of the different permission sets and permission set groups and public groups and things like that. So this one's actually fairly new, but if I zoom out, here it is right here. It's a little crazy. Maybe I could have done it a little more efficiently, but this looks at different information about that user that was provided by the manager and information that we enter, and it goes in and applies a lot of different information around, like I said, public groups,
Permission sets.
permission set groups, everything else. And then it calls subflows to go on to the next step to create the user, and then a subflow to create all the different assignments. So again, it was some work to get this working and test it out, but it saved us. We're constantly onboarding people. It's kind of crazy right now. And so this has saved us. I can't even think of how many hours, although, as we'll show you in a minute, we have an estimate. Okay, cool. Thanks, Nana. So another thing we've done to try to make our flows work a little better is we've added just very simple graphics. So we've got a little note here, jazz up your flows with graphics. So we had a request from the business to do a project closeout process where they would walk through a series of questions and indicate if they had completed certain project closeout steps. And that was all pretty easy to do with Flow, but it was a little bit hard to visually consume the information because it was just very kind of monotonous. As you know, flow screens are great, but they're fairly simple. And so we were trying to figure out a way to make it a little easier to really just easier to use the system. And so we found a way that you could upload a graphic and then you could show that in a flow. So if I go here, what you do is you upload an image as a static resource. So we've actually uploaded 2 lines in our JLL branded colors, a horizontal line and a vertical line. And if we go look at it, it's just a standard Salesforce static resource. You can view it, and like I said, it is just a
It's a
line.
red line.
Yep. And then in your flow, you can add that to your flow screens. So if I go in here to this first screen, it doesn't look very good as you're building it. You can see this display image. So you can't really see it here in the builder, but you can add that line over and over onto your page, however you want, to kind of provide a little bit of visual delineation to your flow. And so if we actually go and look at it on a project, we've added it as a tab so somebody can go to their project, and we actually only display it at certain stages. They have to be at a certain point in the process before they can complete the closeout process. And here's how it looks. So you've got these nice little red lines that separate the different sections of information about the flow. And so our project manager, they don't have to do it all at once. They can come in and say they've finished some of the steps, but they haven't finished them all, and walk through this process. And then every time they come back here, they can continue to fill out the form until the process is completely done, at which point the form hides itself and says your project closeout process is complete.
So I
But just
could
little, oh,
conceptually,
yeah, go
Marshall,
ahead.
could
Yeah.
I use this same feature with a static resource and create a static resource with my Bitmoji on it and like put my Bitmoji on flow screens?
Well, Nana, you have actually already done that, so
Yeah.
you know the answer to that. So yes, and Nana has blinged out some of our flows with Bitmojis and other memes to try to make it a little
Yes.
bit more fun to work inside of Salesforce.
It's kind of like adding confetti at the end, right?
Yeah, it's our
We got to
version of
make it
confetti.
fun.
There you go. Awesome. So again, we're just kind of throwing out ideas. These may not apply to your business at all, but maybe some of the concepts or the thoughts will resonate, and maybe you're thinking about some of the things that you do on a daily basis and thinking about ways you can make them better. So we wanted to cover just 2 more, and it looks like we have some time. Another thing that we've done, this is to help us and the users, is we've done automated chatter posts. We years ago, when Nan and I inherited the system, there were email notifications when opportunities were won or were lost, and they went out to a set group of people. And we would constantly get requests from our CEO, send these emails to this person and these emails to that person and these emails to this person, except if it's this, and send, and it was just all these complex rules. And neither of us really wanted to set that up and manage it. And you're constantly hiring and changing people, and we just didn't feel like that was a good use of our time or a good use of Salesforce. So what we decided to do, we work out of what we call practices. And so we set up a series of chatter groups for our practices. We did a closed won and a closed lost chatter group. And then we automated chatter posts into those groups when opportunities are won or when opportunities are lost. And then we trained our users, if you want to get notified, go join the group. And you can, as you know, you can control your notifications. So you can get notified every post, you can get notified weekly, you can get no notifications at all. And so I'll just flip over very briefly in our sandbox and show you that. So it's really enabling your users to self-serve. Oh, I hope I copied the chatter group when I refresh the sandbox. I think I did. There we go. So you can see we have a little standard branding. We have the little sad thumbs down when you lose something and a happy $sign when you win something. And so we can go into any of these and we can see the chatter post. And so, like I said, anybody can join those and get the information they want without us having to do a single thing. We just set those up and we let them run.
Yeah, and what we really like to do is it also drives people back to the system, and by by the use of Chatter, right? The use of Chatter to provide a link where somebody clicks on a link to get to that information. And you can still embed information in that Chatter post. But the hope is that you're driving people to the system to look at data in the system, because that's where we really want people to be making their decisions and doing their day-to-day.
Next
So the
is one of
last
our
one, Marshall, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of our most devilish flows, and I actually can't show it in this sandbox right now because I've been playing around with it. But everybody, we all care about data. We all care about the accuracy of our data, and probably we all get really irritated when there's data that's missing or out of date. And so, especially when you're talking about opportunities in your sales pipeline, it's really important to know if the close date is accurate and if the opportunity information is accurate. And one of the biggest problems we were having was that people were not keeping their opportunity dates up to date. And so you'd look at your pipeline and a third of your opportunities were in the past, which we can't go back in time and close win an opportunity. So we knew that data was incorrect. So we came up with several ways to try to fix this. We had alerts, and we have lightning alerts at the top of the page. We have what we call a pipeline health check dashboard where we can show data quality issues on our pipeline. But this is one we really wanted to find a better way to solve. And so what we did is using the power of lightning, if your opportunity date is in the past and your opportunity is open, an open opportunity in the past should never happen. In that situation, we used a lightning page layout and we hid everything. We hid the related lists, we hid the details, we hid Chatter, we hid everything. And we created a super simple flow, and all it had was one field, and it was the close date and a message that said, update your close date to proceed. And so literally an opportunity manager, or even worse, that person's manager, can't even view the details of their opportunity until somebody updates the data. So that has been
A little bit of a
very
stick, but
effective. Yeah, very
not a
effective.
carrot.
Maybe not popular, but it's been effective, and it's had a big impact on us having better data in the system.
Yep.
So, Nana, do you want to talk about automation analytics? I think that's where we wanted to wrap this thing up.
Yeah, the last one's automation analytics. And, Salesforce has provided some analytic tools on which of your flows are being used and that sort of thing. But this was something we actually created internally for our own team so that at the end of the year, we could show what we've done, right? From a system perspective, from a performance perspective, what are the things that we've done to affect change in the system and to do things like save time, right? So all of these things take time, that adding new products to a price book in all the currencies. If you time it out, Marshall, how much time would you say it takes to add a new product to the price book in all the currencies manually?
Before the flow?
Before the flow. Mm-hmm.
Probably 10 to 15 minutes, because I would do it wrong a couple of times and get errors and have to fix it,
Yeah,
to be 100% honest.
exactly.
Yeah, I think I estimate that at 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah. So what we did is we created just, again, a simple custom object that captures the name of the flow, and it captures who ran the flow, what time they ran it, obviously, and then it captures the amount of time saved. And then what we do is in every flow that we've actually got, you see this increment automation tracker where we create a record in that object and we pass in the date and time, we pass in the name of the flow, and we pass in the estimated minutes saved by running this flow. So every single flow that we've created in the system, we've done a time study to see how much time it would have taken manually, and we embed the number of minutes saved into our automation analytics, and we create a record every time those flows are called, right? So at the end of the day or the end of the year, when you're looking at your review and trying to show your manager what you've done, you can show how much time has been saved by the automations you created in your org. And this was as of January, since January 2019, and as of what, probably a few weeks ago, Marshall, in the sandbox?
I took the screenshot this morning out of production.
Okay, yeah, so that's the number of hours saved by the automations that we've created in our org. for our team members. And it's not just, flows that we ran, but it's flows that other people are running as well, that is saving them time because we were able to automate a process that they normally run. So this is one of my favorites. I always say you got to toot your own horn. You can admin and you can architect and you can develop on the Salesforce platform, and people will never know what you did. So you've got to write your own performance review. You've got to make sure that you're tooting your own horn and showing people the value that you're creating for them.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And then also, as Nana said, with this information, we can actually make sure people are using the automations we've put in place. Maybe they don't know about it. We need to get the word out. Maybe it's not working to meet their needs, so we need to reevaluate how we designed it and tweak it. But you can look and see how often they're getting used and by whom, and then decide whether or not you think it's being used effectively or not, and try to figure out the way to make it as effective as possible.
Yep.
So that is our story today.
This image always makes me laugh.
The power of lightning.
Exactly. Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. Hold on. Let me
Awesome.
cue those up. I really like that reporting. That's super awesome.
We couldn't keep track of all the things we'd done, so we figured we might as well use a flow to do that for us.
Yeah, right?
Lazy.
Okay, so first question is from Squire. You can't manually share twice or at all. So if there were already a non-custom sharing record, would it still throw an error?
Yes, I believe so. I believe that if the share is already there, that's why we have to check in advance before we share, whether we're doing it manually or automatically. The one exception to that I remember is if somebody is shared through a group, you can still share with them manually. So that will not create an error. But if there's already been a share, manual or automatic, to an individual person, you can't share with that person again.
Yep.
Gotcha. Next question is from Murphy. Hi, I was wondering if you can run into a mixed DML operation error in your user access requests.
In our user access request. I'd probably need a little more information on that.
Yeah, I know what you mean by DML, but I'm not sure what you mean by mixed DML in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody doesn't have access to that record, you would absolutely run into an issue. It's not going to be able to share with somebody who doesn't already have access via profile or permission set to that particular record or object. So you would get a flow error there. So again, another consideration, we probably need to add that to the list, Marshall, is we need to make sure that anybody that we're potentially sharing with would have access to the record via profiles or permission sets already.
So Murphy did clarify. So he says when you create a user record and update a custom object in the same flow, you can get the error.
Oh, okay. That was on our employee onboarding one. Marshall, you want to talk about? We actually, Jen helped us solve that.
We put an emergency call out to Twitter, and Jen was the one that helped us fix that. I think it's actually changed, but when you throw a screen up into a flow, it essentially closes one operation and you can start another one. So that's why we actually have those subflow, the 3 flows for creating the employee, because the first one is manipulating user information. And so as you said, what the question is that, or the issue is that when you're in a flow, when you're manipulating setup type information, metadata and user data, you can't then flip over and edit or update normal information, an opportunity, a case, an account. You'll get an error, but you can either call a subflow, or what Jen told us is throw up a screen, and somehow throwing up a screen magically closes that first part of the transaction, and now you can move over to the second part of your transaction.
And I think someone might have posted something on unofficial SF where you can bring in something that closes the transaction and creates a new one.
Oh, cool.
You might want to check that out.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard there's been some changes since we first put this together.
All right, next question from Chris. I would welcome any verbal insights to the presenter's approach to reassign records when users leave?
Yeah, so good question. So one thing we've done is we've drilled it into the person who offboards users to always, 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 always check the box to remove people from account teams and opportunity teams, because we do have flows that share with account teams and opportunity teams. And then from a record reassignment, that was one that we actually created a flow that's got a button on it. So from in our org, we've got, I mentioned Financial Force PSA, which is project management, right? And so all of our projects are related to accounts in the system. And what we try to do is we try to keep our project ownership aligned with the account ownership in the system. And normally when a user leaves, right, you can in the setup, you can mass reassign the standard things, but we wanted to be able to mass reassign just the active projects. We didn't want to reassign inactive projects and things like that. And so we actually created a really simple flow that we've got a button on the account record where we run that, and it goes and it picks up all the projects that are active and it reassigns ownership to the new owner of the account. So kind of think through what those objects might be, right, that you're wanting to reassign ownership of, and see see how you need to build your flow, right? Marshall, what else would you have to say on that?
Yeah, I was going to elaborate a little bit. The other thing that's a challenge is, in addition to the owner of records, we also have on our projects a project manager, which is actually looking up on contacts, not on users. And so even standard, or just changing owners doesn't do it for us. So we have automated making picking a new project manager, basically, that has to be a contact. But because our contacts are linked to users, then we can do all that through Flow. We can make those connections.
Mm-hmm. So kind of sit down and outline the various records that you need changed when someone gets offboarded, and then walk through how to get those records, right? You're gonna open up your flow and you're gonna say get the records where the owner ID equals this person, right? This ID that we're sending in, and you get the various record types of the things you need to get, and you go through and you do your owner updates.
Great. Next question from George. One question from your superb demo. Please review the relationship between the objects used in your first demo. For example, account, private, survey, other objects. Was private survey a child in the master detail relationship under the person account, or a lookup relationship, or something else? Thanks again for the fantabulous presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, George. Yeah, so the private survey object is a custom object, not a child object of anything. And it has a lookup to the case, and it has a lookup to the account. And the reason that we built it like that is so that we could actually extend that for other objects as well if we potentially wanted to, right? When the survey with the external survey system goes out, when we send a survey, we're sending and embedding in that URL the links to the case and to the account. So when that survey record comes back in, it's actually populating the lookup fields to match the account and the case that survey result is related to. But we could always reuse that object on if we wanted to relate it to opportunities, and we could start sending surveys that have a link to the opportunity and bring that back in, right? We would just have to handle for that in our flow and say, what type of survey result is this? Is this a case survey, or is this an opportunity survey? And send it the right path to do the right sharing based on the type of survey result.
Great. Next question is from Karen. Which are your favorite resources for an aspiring automation champion? I've mastered all the other automation tools, but struggle with Flow.
Marshall, because I struggle. I'm on the struggle bus too. That's why he did that part of the demo.
I actually, it's escaping me right now. What's Ben's website? I cannot
Salesforce
remember.
Ben. Jen
Yes.
website, Rakesh's website, Automation
Yeah.
Hour, all the things.
Yeah, and we can share those in the community afterward. But it's been all those things. I mean, like I said, I wasn't lying when I said Nana put out an emergency help on Twitter and Jen replied. So
Do that.
leveraging those websites are really valuable, and we'll make sure those get posted into the community because I don't remember all of them right now. But those are three really great, non-Salesforce resources. Trailhead's good. It's only going to get you so far because a lot of the examples are kind of simple, but they're a good place to start. So definitely
Mhm.
look at Trailhead.
What I would
And then
also suggest,
oh
yeah,
yeah,
go
go
ahead,
ahead. No,
Marshall.
no, no, please, Nana, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing I like to do, I always did this in Excel when I was learning how to do formulas in Excel, and even in Salesforce when I learned how to do formulas or when I'm learning how to do flow, getting in there and just trying it, right? Stealing somebody else's and rebuilding it myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I look at what somebody else did and then I try to replicate it myself, I'm gonna be kind of walking myself through it and teaching myself as I'm doing it. And I can always then ask that person, hey, I noticed you did this here. Why'd you do that? Right. And then Marshall and I spend a ton of time, or we did, and we would literally just be on a call like this, and I'd be like, show me why you did that, tell me why you created the assignment that way, because I don't understand. And he would walk me through it, or I'd get stuck and call him in. So having people that you can do that with, because sometimes you get stuck and you just need somebody else to look at it for you, right?
And
Mm-hmm.
and honestly, we would love to do that. We have done it in the past where we've just jumped on a call with somebody and helped them with a flow. So
Yep.
we're
So
available in the community if you want to reach out and ask for assistance or guidance.
Marlene has a comment. Excellent presentation. Thank you for, in quotes, sharing all your flows and
But bum.
all right. Murphy's question is, when you create, oh, we already went through that. Dominic says, thanks for a great presentation on all the useful tips. In user access flows, if you end up deleting a public group, does Salesforce allow you to do that if it's referenced in a flow, or if so, does it cause any issues in your flow?
I don't think it would allow you to do it if it's referenced in anything. So
Unless you're just
Salesforce is pretty smart about not letting you delete stuff that's referenced in other places.
unless you're just referencing an ID, in which case it's just a piece of text to Salesforce. And if that's the case, your flow will fail because your flow will try to update or assign somebody to a public group, and that public group won't exist, and it will fail.
Yep.
But Nana's right. A lot of times, if you're referencing it as a record variable, then
Yeah.
frequently it'll say you can't do this because it's referenced someplace.
Mhm. All right, so we have 3 minutes left. If anyone has any further questions, now is the time to get that in.
Really appreciate everybody jumping on this Friday afternoon. It's Fun Friday. Marshall used to always, what we would do when I worked with him at JLL is Friday afternoons were Flow Fridays. And we would get to Friday afternoon, and by then we were kind of frustrated and ready to be done with the week, and we would work on flows at the end of the day on a Friday because they were fun.
I love that. All right, one question came in from Gent. Any flow to remove permission sets and manage package licenses when users leave?
So we haven't been able to figure out how to handle for managed package licenses. So if
Yep.
anybody knows how to do that and assign those in a flow or take those away in a flow, we have not found the way to do that. That's always been manual for us. So we send a reminder once we've onboarded a user. We've got a reminder for our admin, don't forget the managed package licenses. But from a permission set perspective, you could remove permission sets or add permission sets as needed.
Yep. One other thing we haven't been able to figure out in Flow related to users is there's a checkbox which says Flow user, and we check that for all of our users because we have user-facing flows, and we have not. You can
Errors.
see it in the flow, but when you try to set it, it errors out. So if somebody has a solution for that, we would love it.
Interesting. I do have a blog post on adding and removing permission sets, and I think I have one up for when Map Anything was not owned by Salesforce and they had managed package licenses.
Oh, cool.
So check
Okay.
out my blog. It's jenwlee.com.
Perfect.
Great.
You've always got the best resources.
I've had to do these things myself. I'm like, oh,
Well, that's the thing is all these things that we're showing, it's all, the considerations about the sharing, it's all trial and error, right? We tried it, we got error messages. Okay, well, why doesn't this work? We tried to figure it out. So
yeah,
helping each other is the way to go.
I built automation when we have a user leave, it removes them from a call center, a public group, a queue, all sorts of things, all the things to
Nice.
clean that up. Yeah. All right, so we're at time. I don't see any other questions. This was an awesome presentation. I would love to have you both back at some point. I know you don't work together, but
I have to call her pretty frequently, so we're still in touch. And I
feel
don't want to
free
speak
to
for Nana,
come
but
back
I'd love
as a
to.
duo or solo. That's fine.
Sure, that would be great. I
Awesome.
would love to come back. Thank you so much for
Thanks for
having me.
having us on.
All right, and with that, we'll see you all next time in 2 weeks. So thanks,
Awesome.
everybody.
Thanks, y'all. Happy Friday.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.